She did not know what she had shot. The mark had been so far out at sea, almost invisible above the moving water. She had drawn her bow because her brother had doubted her aim. She had let the arrow go the way she always did. Clean. Sure. Without hesitation. And then she waded into the surf to bring back the thing she had hit. When she turned the body face up, she understood everything. The arm that fell sideways in the foam. The bronze club still lashed to the belt. The face she had walked beside through forests on Crete in a silence only hunters know. The arrow had gone exactly where she sent it. You can imagine the goddess standing there, the water cold around her ankles, her brother somewhere out of sight, having already gotten what he wanted, and the only man she had ever let walk beside her, face down in the surf, killed by her own steady hand. This is one of the endings of the Orion myth. There are others, and they matter, but this is the one a goddess had to live with. And the strangest part is this. The arrow was not even where the story really begins. Not the deepest reason he died. The earth itself had also been keeping count. We will come back to that. Before he was a body in the surf, before Artemis carried him into the night sky out of grief, Orion was a man, or something close to a man. The ancient storytellers could never quite agree on what he was, only that the world had never seen anything like him. And his story begins, strangely enough, with a childless king and a sacrificed bull. The oldest version of his birth survives in fragments of Hesiod, and is told more fully by Hyginus. There was a king in Boeotia named Hyrieus, a man without sons, which in the ancient world meant a man without a future. One evening, 3 travelers came to his door. They were not travelers. They were Zeus, Poseidon, and Hermes, walking through the mortal world in disguise. Hyrieus did not know who they were. He welcomed them the way a good host should. He killed his finest bull. He poured wine without measure. He sat with them until the fire burned low. When the gods finally asked what he wanted most in the world, Hyrieus did not ask for gold, or land, or victory. He asked for a son. He said he had given the last of his livestock to honor them, and he had nothing left to bargain with. But he wanted this more than anything he had ever wanted. The gods could not simply make life from nothing, so they did something stranger. They took the hide of the bull he had sacrificed. They performed a rite over it. They buried it in the ground, and 9 months later, a child was born from the earth itself. He was enormous, even as an infant. Hyginus ties his name to the ritual itself, to water and soil, and to something made from what should have been dead. The etymology is unglamorous. The child was not. This is the first thing you need to understand about Orion. He did not arrive through the ordinary channels. He came from the ground, from divine effort, from the collaboration of 3 gods who owed a debt to a lonely and generous man. He was never entirely human, and he never lived as though he was. Other sources give him a different father entirely. Some say Poseidon was his father directly, and that the sea god passed his nature down without ceremony. In those versions, Orion could walk on the surface of the water. Not swim, walk, his feet on the waves the way a man's feet sit on dry stone. If you picture him doing that, something shifts. He was a figure who did not respect the line between what was possible and what was not. The sea was not an obstacle to him. It was a surface. Everything was a surface to him. And then there was the hunting. Every ancient source agrees on this part. Orion was the greatest hunter who had ever lived. Not merely skilled, not merely fearless. Extraordinary in a way that made other hunters feel they had chosen the wrong life. He could track across stone and water and silence. He killed creatures with no names. He moved through wilderness the way a god moves through a room, as if it belonged to him. You can imagine the kind of man he became, loved by some, feared by many, praised by kings until he frightened them, wanted by goddesses until they grew tired of his weight. The greatness was real. So was the appetite that came with it. He arrived on the island of Chios when the wine there was famous, and the king was named Oenopion, a son of Dionysus. Orion saw the king's daughter Merope. He wanted her. He offered his skills in exchange for her hand. He cleared the island of its lions and wolves and dangerous things and brought the skins as proof of what he was worth. One season of this, then two, then more. But Oenopion kept delaying. The wedding was always one season away. One more test, one more year of service to prove what had already been proven. One night, drunk on the king's own wine, Orion took what he had decided he was owed. He forced himself on Merope. He did what a man does when he has spent so long believing his strength exempts him from the ordinary rules of wanting. You can hear how the myth changes shape when you say it plainly. This was not a hero's misstep. This was the first crack in the figure. Oenopion, who could not match Orion in any kind of fight, found another way. He waited until the giant was deep in wine and sleep, and he put out both his eyes in the dark. For a hunter, blindness was not merely punishment, it was annihilation. Orion stumbled off the island without knowing which direction was the sea. Apollodorus preserves the strangest detail of what happened next. The blind hunter found his way to the forge of Hephaestus, where a young apprentice named Sedalion climbed onto his shoulders. The boy guided him east, toward Eos, toward the place where the sky opens first, and the light of the dawn, without ceremony or explanation, gave him back his eyes. He returned to Chios looking for Oenopion. He searched the island completely. He found nothing. The king had hidden himself underground, beneath the earth, in the dark where the recovered eyes of the hunter could not reach. Orion, who could walk on the sea, could not find a man who had simply gone down. Now, watch what happens next, because after this, the stories diverge, and the differences matter more than the similarities. In Apollodorus, Orion crosses to Crete. There he begins to hunt with Artemis. Artemis, who had sworn herself away from men, who had driven off everyone who came too close, who never let any mortal walk beside her, Artemis ran with him. They tracked the same prey through the same mountains. They shared the silence that only hunters know. Apollodorus does not say it openly, but he allows the implication to sit in the text. The goddess of the wild had found, for the first and only time, someone the wild had also made. Her twin brother Apollo saw this and did not approve. We have already seen the ending of this version. The dark speck at sea, the wager, the arrow that Artemis fired into a target she did not recognize, the goddess wading into the surf to find what she had killed. Apollodorus says she placed Orion among the stars out of grief. Not honor, not reward. Grief, which is a different kind of weight entirely. She did not look away. She did not name it fate and move on. She carried the fact of what she had done into eternity, and the winter sky still holds the evidence of it, whether she wanted that or not. That is one version of why he died. There are two more, and they say something different. The second begins not with love or trickery, but with a boast. Orion declared to whatever air and sky and earth was listening that he would kill every wild creature on earth, every beast, every animal with fur and claw and breath. He would hunt them all until the wilderness was empty and still, and his Gaia heard him, the earth itself, the oldest power, older than Zeus, older than the Olympians, the thing beneath all things. She had made the animals long before any god put names on them. She had seeded the world with creatures that had their own right to exist. Gaia did not send an army. She did not bring her grievance to the divine courts. She reached into the ground and drew out a scorpion. Small, armored, patient, built for one purpose, and she sent it toward Orion. The scorpion did not give him a battle that would make a good story. It simply stung him. That was all. One sting, and the greatest hunter who ever lived collapsed in the dust like anyone else. The earth had answered him in her own language, which was small and quiet and final. The arrow, then, was not even the deepest reason he died. Even if Artemis had not drawn her bow, the earth had already decided. The scorpion was already on its way, and, as you will see, it never quite stopped coming. And then there is the third version. This one comes from Homer in the Odyssey, and so carries a different kind of authority than any other. In Book 5 of the Odyssey, in lines spoken bitterly by the goddess Calypso, we hear that Eos, the goddess of dawn, fell in love with Orion and took him from his island of Ortygia. Calypso is making a complaint when she says this. She is angry that the male gods can love mortal women freely, but the goddesses who love mortal men are punished for it. Orion is her example. She remembers what happened to him. You have to understand who Eos was. The Dawn was not a gentle figure in Greek myth. She was a goddess with a long, painful history of mortal lovers. She had taken Tithonus and begged Zeus to make him immortal, then watched in horror as he aged forever because she had forgotten to ask for eternal youth as well. She had loved Cephalus and lost him too. Every man she chose became a wound in her divine memory. And still she kept choosing. When she took Orion from Ortygia, she was doing the thing the other Olympians most resented. She was carrying a mortal upward, treating him as something the gods could share their world with. Calypso says in Homer's lines that the gods who live at ease did not approve. There was something about Orion specifically that crossed a line no one had written down. So Artemis was sent. Or so the story implies. Homer does not give us the scene the way Apollodorus does. There is no wager, no trick, no dark speck on the water. Homer's Artemis simply arrives on Ortygia and kills Orion with her gentle arrows. Those two words do something strange to the violence. Gentle arrows. The Greek phrase is one Homer uses elsewhere when a death is quick, painless, almost merciful. As if the goddess of the hunt, this time, was not punishing. She was closing something, ending a situation the gods could not allow to continue. The arrows were gentle because the goddess was not personally angry. She was correcting an order that had been disturbed. This is the part of Homer's version that stays with the ancient reader longest. The fact that no one is really to blame. Eos loved. Orion accepted. The gods disapproved. Artemis ended it. No villain in the story. Just a structure of cosmic rules that could not bend, and a man who happened to be the figure pressing against it. Homer does not call it just. He does not call it punishment. He does not explain why the gods disapproved. He writes it the way old poets write the hardest things. As a fact, simply stated, with no explanation given. As if explanation would make it smaller. The silence in Homer's account is the loudest sound in the entire myth. Three versions, then. Apollo's trick, Gaia's scorpion, Eos's love. The ancient storytellers did not agree on every detail. That is part of the point. The Greeks let three different reasons for the same death stand side by side, because all three were saying something true about who Orion was. He was the man a goddess could shoot. He was the man the earth had to answer. He was the man whose existence the order of the world could not quite hold. All three end the same way. A man falling. A figure too vast for the earth to keep for long. And then a decision in the sky. Zeus placed Orion among the stars. Some say it was at Artemis's request, out of grief. Some say it was Zeus's own decision, a recognition that a figure this large deserved a permanent address. The hunter became the constellation we still see today, the three-star belt, the bright shoulders, the sword hanging from his waist. But the strange part is this. Gaia also placed the scorpion in the sky, and the gods, depending on which version you follow, did not let them rest in the same season. You can see it for yourself. When Orion rises in the winter sky, Scorpius is gone, hidden below the horizon. When Scorpius climbs into the summer sky, Orion has already slipped beneath the earth. The hunter and the creature that killed him never share a sky. They take turns. One rises as the other falls. Forever. Herodotus noticed this separation and wrote about it. Eratosthenes described the arrangement. The ancient world did not treat this as coincidence or as a quirk of celestial geometry. They treated it as a sentence the sky was still serving. The scorpion is still following him, not catching him, not letting him go, just following, the way a consequence follows a choice through eternity. And the sky did not stop with the scorpion. Look closely at Orion on a winter night. Below his foot, brighter than any other star you will ever see, is Sirius, the dog star. The ancient writers called it the star burning at the heel of Orion's hunting hound, the dog that ran with him in life and follows him still. Even after death, even after the goddess and the scorpion and the gods who let it all happen, the hunt continues. The dog is at his heel. The chase has never stopped. And above his shoulder sometimes a small cluster of stars, the Pleiades, the seven sisters, daughters of Atlas. Some ancient storytellers said Orion had pursued them through the world while he lived, that they had fled him for years, that Zeus had finally placed them in the sky to give them rest. But the rest was incomplete, because Orion was placed there too, and now he chases them across the heavens, season after season, never closing the distance. It is one of the oldest pictures of longing in the world. A hunter who reaches and never catches. A grief written into the turning of the stars. You could read the Orion myth as a story about pride. A man too vast for his own existence, certain the world was made to be hunted, corrected by a universe that did not agree. That reading is available, and it is not wrong. You could read it as a story about what happens when strength becomes entitlement. The Oenopian story does not disappear because the other versions are more dramatic. It sits inside the myth and refuses to leave. The greatest hunter alive decided that service was the same as ownership, that waiting was the same as being owed. The myth never quite forgives him for it. But the reading the myth itself keeps returning to is something quieter. The myth is not really sure he deserved to die. It is only sure that the world could not hold him much longer. The gods did not give him his life back. They gave him something colder. They gave him the winter sky. They gave him eternity, which is just another word for a story no one knows how to end. When you step outside on a cold January night, in a place dark enough to see the old constellations, you will find him. 3 stars in a perfect line, a shoulder of red fire, a foot of blue-white light, the dog still at his heel, the sisters out of reach above his shoulder, and the season turning slowly toward the one in which the scorpion rises. He is still up there, and the scorpion is still behind him.